In this video, I'm going to show you how to add 3D animations to your games in Gdevelop. Let's get right into it. So let's get started. Now the first thing we want to learn how to do is how do we actually add a 3D animation to our Gdevelop game, like just a standalone an object that just moves. How do we add that to Gdevelop? Now the first thing we want to actually do is add a new object. And it's not as complicated as it looks. It's actually quite simple once you get the hang of it. So you add a 3D model and you name it whatever you like. I'm just gonna name this model I'm actually just gonna name it model, literally just model. And as you can see, we can add a 3D model to this to the model. We can add 3D model here. We don't want to set any lighting effects, and we don't want to change any of this. And the first thing we want to do is actually add a 3D model. Now I'm going to choose a file. I'm going to choose it from the asset store just so we can learn how to add a 3D model first. And I'm going to scroll down to where it says 3D animated, well 3D, there's 3D animated dinosaurs right here or something. And I'm going to put this Velociraptor right here. And it's a GLB files or the .glb files are the only files that are allowed to be used in Gdevelop at the moment. And I'm going to hit apply. Now I'm going to drag this model onto the scene. And if I drag it onto the scene, you see if I zoom up by scrolling in, you see this Velociraptor, of course. And I can change its rotation to make it look a certain way. In this case, I'll have it set 9 degrees so it can look to the side. And I'm going to hit preview. And as you can see, we have a 3D model in the game once it loads up. We have a 3D model, but it's not moving. It's not moving. And I'm going to go X this out, and we're going to double click back into our model, scroll down, and add an animation. This is where the magic happens when it comes to Gdevelop. Now, if I choose an animation, this Velociraptor that I found in the asset store, it already has set animations that were from the model. And choose an animation. I can choose all of these animations I want to select from. So in this case, I'm going to choose this run animation, and I can set whether or not I want to loop or not. And in this case, I want to loop. And now I'm going to actually make this thing bigger with a custom size. Let's set, well, let me just keep it the same just so we can see, because we can still see whether it's moving. I can see, you see that this Velociraptor is now running. And you might be like, that's it, right? That's how you add animations. Well, that kind of is basically how you add animation, but I also want to show you how do you add your own animations, like, well, not your own animation, how do you add your own models? Now, of course, if you want to add truly your own unique models, you will have to learn how to 3D model and 3D animate, and that's something I do not know how to do at the moment. But if you do know how to do it, just make sure you make the file and put it in .glb format. But what I'm going to show you is how do you import files from the internet. Let's say you want to include a different character or a different model in your game. How do you do that? Now, I'm going to go into my browser here, and a good place to look for 3D models and 3D animations is a website called Sketchfab. It has a lot of free 3D animation. Also has one that I paid for. Models is very good for looking for 3D assets. In this case, I've already looked this up before. We're going to use this for the tutorial. You can you can search up Sketchfab Mario dancing, and you'll get this animation right here. I'm going to click into it, and you'll get this animation once it loads up. We wait for it to load up. It's going to take a little bit. And we get this animation right here. It's just simply Mario dancing. And how do we get this animation to our game? Because it's very common to use other people's animations and everything. So of course you hit download 3D model, and then you go into converted format. And the converted format, make sure the converted format is .glb. So pay attention to this where it says it right here, .glb, .gltf, all these other ones. Remember, Gdevelop can only take .glb. So let's download this .glb file. And I'll go to save it on my desktop just so I can easily find out. I'll delete it later. And yeah, that's here it is. And another thing I want to show you as well, and I'm going to go to my desktop. Don't worry about the background. I promise you everything's just fine. But let's say you download a 3D model that it doesn't have as a selection .glb format. That is a possibility. But what you'll want to do is download and install Blender. It's pretty self-explanatory. You just download, go to the Blender page and install it. But assuming that you were to have it, you don't have to have it to follow along. I'm going to double click into Blender and open it. And you might see something I was on last time. But you can export your files that are not GLB into GLB format. And all you have to do is hit File, you go down to Export, and then you can export to GLTF or .glb right here. So if you have a 3D model that's not in that format, put it inside Blender and then export it to .glb. That's all you have to do. So let me exit Blender now, and let's get back into Gdevelop. Now that we have the Mario downloaded, we're gonna go double click into the model, and where it says 3D model, we want to replace this with what we just downloaded. So I'm gonna go down to desktop, and I'm gonna double click Mario Dancing.glb, click OK, and as you can see, it's imported now. So another thing we want to do now, we can set the animation names, and I'm gonna tell it to scan missing animations. Well, let me delete this new one. Scan missing animations, and let's see what happens. Nothing has happened at the moment. Oh, I forgot that because it only has a default animation. Mario doesn't have many animations to select from. It's just one default animation. I was just looking for something else. So I'm gonna hit apply and then leave the name alone. Keep it the same. And I'm gonna hit loop and apply. As you can see, this Mario it looks weird right now because it's from a side profile. So I'm gonna says rotation equal to 0. And as you see, it looks like he's T-posing right now. But let's run it and see what happens. You can see it from a distance right now, and he's definitely moving. He's definitely dancing in the background. We can see that this is a real 3D model, and I can't show you right now. Let me try to make him a little bit bigger. Um, Let me set this to 50. Let me set this to like 70, so we can see this better. And I'm gonna hit preview, but I don't have the rotation controls because there's not a tutorial for that, but he is actually a 3D model. You can go all around him and he will be 3D all around. So that's how you import a 3D animation to your game. Now you might be wondering, how do I actually use 3D animations on an actual character? Like what are some actual useful real applications that I can use 3D animations for? So what I'm going to do and what we're going to do is we're going to program a quick 2.5D platformer that uses 3D animations. Now, the first thing we're going to do actually is exile this. We're going to delete this, delete the Mario that was dancing, no more dancing, and we're going to delete the model. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to download a new 3D model that we can use for our 2D platformer. So I'm going to hit go back into Brave, and since we're already on Sketchfab, I searched up one that can be good already, but you can also search up your own. But I found one that's good. All you have to do is search LP platform character, and this one was good that I found. The only problem is it doesn't necessarily have an idle animation. Make sure you put it's in the animated tab, and then put downloadable. Oh, I might have to reset the whole thing. Let me just refresh. Go to back to Sketchfab's home. Search for a 3D model. It should search LP platform hero. I should never put character. It's supposed to be hero. And now it pops up here. This is what we're going to use. Like I said, the only problem is it doesn't have an auto animation, but the same thing still applies whether you have auto animation or not. So as you can see, there's like a low poly hero. It doesn't have to be low poly. You can choose anything you want. So we're going to download 3D model. Make sure it's in .glb format. In this case, it's the original format. I'm going to download it, and I'm going to save it on my desktop. Hit save, and once it's downloaded, we can exile of Brave. And as you can see, it's in a zip file. So actually, let's go there first, show in folder. And now it's over here on my desktop. I'm going to right click it and put extract all. And if you're on Windows 10, it should have an extract here option. You'll want to put that one instead. And now I'm going to find where it says LP Platform Hero, the one that's not zip. Double click in here, go to source, and then just make sure it's in there. Now I'm going to exile Brave, and let's get back into the project. So add a new object, scroll down till you get 3D model, and then you want to call this, let's just call it player, because this is what's going to be the player. And let's choose a file from our computer, and then I'm going to click into my desktop, and let me see, desktop, go to LP Platform Hero, the folder, go to source, because if you go to textures, there's actually supposed to be a PNG, we can't see it here, but go to source and go to hero.glb. Now I click OK, and now he's in here. And if I add an animation, we're not going to use this yet, But if I add an animation here, you'll see that it has fall, jump, run, and then the original T-pose feature. There's no idle in here, like I said, that is one problem with it. But if you're searching up your own 3D platform, make sure it has idle in it too. Now I'm going to keep it the same, no lighting effects on it, because if we set a lighting effect, it'll make it look, I believe it'll make it look white automatically. So I'm going to hit apply, and then going to drag it onto the scene. And as you can see, it seems like he's not facing sideways, because since we want this to be a 2.5D platformer, we want him to be facing sideways. And in order to rotate them sideways in Gdevelop, you change the Y rotation of the object. And in this case, I'm going to change it to -75, and now as you can see, it looks like he's actually facing to the side. Now, another thing we want to do is add a ground object that our player can actually stand on. So I'm going to click add a new object, click into a sprite, and I'm just going to call this ground, and let's add an animation, and let's add a sprite. I'm going to go into my pictures, I'm going to go into my game sprites, and I'm going to go into my tutorial sprites and click this dirt. Now, you don't have to use anything like this. You can use any sprites you want in Pisco, just color an entire cube red or blue. But I'm just going to use dirt in this case. So, this is the dirt right here, and we want to add behavior to it as well. Add a behavior, and call it a platform behavior. And no, you don't want the ledges to be grabbed. I'm going to hit apply. And let's drag this onto the scene. And I believe, actually I didn't want to make it a regular sprite. Let's delete this object. I'm going to make it a 3D model, not model, a 3D block. Because when you make it a 3D box like this, it looks much better when it's interacting with 3D objects to just use a 3D box. But keep in mind, they can't interact with 2D objects just the same. So once again, I'm going to call this ground. I'm going to use the same sprite for all the faces. So I'm want to put show back face, show left face, show right face, show top face, all the faces. And I'm going to choose, well, I already have the dirt here. So I'm going to just put the dirt in here for every single face until it's filled up. And I'm going to hit apply. And now when I drag onto scene, as you can see, it's 3D. You can tell it's 3D just by looking at it right here. And I'm going to just stretch it out so we have something to stand on. And last but not least, before we actually do anything, I'm going to hit player. Going to go into our player, go into behaviors and add a behavior, put platform character, and I'm not going to change anything at all here. I'm going to just hit apply, and let's preview. Now everything will seem fine at first, but well, he did fall to the ground. Hold on. So behaviors, there's a platform character, and the ground. I forgot to add the ground's platform behavior. So add a behavior on the ground and make sure the platform ledges can be grabbed, no, and hit apply. Now I'm going to preview this. And when it falls on here, you'll see that everything looks fine right now. Of course, he's not moving. We didn't program the animations. But in your own projects, you will run into a problem. And that problem will be when he actually starts moving, like when he starts walking on the ground, it won't look accurate. It'll look like he's like floating above it. And even though you can't really see it here, I just wanted to show it. I wanted to tell you that because when you do actual projects, it may look like he's floating. And when it comes to also 3D models, as you can see right here, I'm going to show right here. This is a perfect example. When I do his running animation, he's clipping through the floor. And the thing is, with Gdevelop 3D models, we can't control their collisions. So in order for we have to make an illusion. Like always with 3D Gdevelop, we have to make an illusion. And that illusion is going to be us making a platform object that actually is doing the platforming and making this X position and Y position relative to that object. So what do I mean by this? Now, first thing we're going to do is double click into our player, go into behaviors, and delete this because we don't want to actually have the platformer attributes anymore. It will not be the one doing the platforming. Now, let's add a new object, and let's call this object, I'm going to call it player, I'm going to call it real player because this is basically what the player actually is and not just the model. Add an animation. I'm going to add a sprite. It's just a red sprite. You can go to Pisco and just color an entire thing red. Click OK. And go into behaviors of this object. Add a new behavior and make it the platform character. You can leave everything default and hit apply. Now, it's important to know this has an actual collision box. As you can see, when I double click to player, there's nowhere in here where I control the collision of the object. It's basing it purely off the height, width, and the depth, which is not accurate and not good. So this right here has an actual hitbox and matches, of course, the sprite naturally. So we want to make the real player similar. We want to make it like a similar width, a similar height to the actual player right here. We want to make it similar, and so the hitbox can be kind of accurate. We don't have to be 100% accurate, but this is pretty good right here. This is pretty good size. I'm going to drag it out. Now, what do we need to do next? Because if I preview the scene, I can control my player. I can control my player. Now we need to do some calculations. We need to make the player's position always match, this player's position. So I'm going to hit real player, and I'm going to click into, not real player, I'm going to click into regular player. And let's delete this animation for now. We don't need it. Apply. And I'm going to go into my code right here. Now, I'm going to add a condition, and this condition is going to be always. It's going to be always. So we don't have to add a condition at all since we want to always happen. Now, we're going to set the position of player. So I'm going to click into player, type in position, and you can just type position because it covers X and Y position. So I'm going to set the condition, not the condition, the position of player. For the X, I'm going to set to real player.x. And for the Y, even though this is not going to look right at first, I'm going to set it to real player.y. And make sure you put parentheses. And I'm going to hit preview. And now, as you can see, it's not going to look right at first. I can see our X position is kind of fine right now. Our X position is fine. Well, not 100% fine, I'll say, but our X position is more accurate than our Y position right here. So we want to change our X position and our Y position. We want our player to move a little bit forward, and of course we want our player to move down. Now I've tested the value for Y already. We're going to add 93. You can do your own tweaks of making it actually match up with the player you see right here. But I wanted to add 93. I'm going to add 5 on the X so it can move to the right. And let's see how this looks. He's still floating in the air a little bit. Still floating in the air. And let me see. Let's move it down more in the Y position by putting this at 100. And basically you just keep changing these values until it looks right. That's all you do. You keep changing it. So I'm going to put this 110 and let's see how that looks. Keep changing it, keep changing it. That looks almost about right. I'm going to put 117. I think that'll look good. 117. And okay, right here this looks fine. And of course we don't want to see this other player anymore. Well, I'm going to add like another 10 pixels. We don't want to see this real player. We don't want to see the hitbox anymore. So let's just get rid of it. And by getting rid of it, I don't mean deleting it. Another thing we want to add in the always condition is always hide the real player. So real player, I'm going to click into it and I'm going to type in hide. And now it's always going to be hidden. So we can't see it. And as you can see, it's fine. Everything's fine. We're not clipping through the floor or anything like that. So let's get into our next thing. The next thing we want to do is actually program the animations. That's what we're here for. We're here to program the animations. Of course, since we don't really have an idle animation, we have to suffice with the run animation. But before we do that, we want to double click into our player, add an animation, and call this animation run. We're going to add 3 animations. We're going to have run, add another animation. We're going to call this jump, and add one more animation, and we call this fall. Now, the run animation we want to loop, and the animation we want set to run. For the the jump animation, we want to be jump, no looping. And for the fall, same thing for jump. We want to fall and no loop. And now let's get it started. Now, in order for us to set it to the run animation, we want to check simply if the player is on the floor. If the player is on the floor, that means we want it to run. Well, if a real player, remember, this is all based on the real player that we programmed the red one, since that's the actual character. So add a new event, add a condition, and if real player, don't choose regular player. If real player is on floor, then we want to go to add action, go into player, change animation by name, and change it to run, and click OK. Now if I hit preview here, let's see how it looks. Okay, we made it a little bit too high right here. We made it a little bit too high. Let me switch this back to 100 and see how this looks. Preview. Okay, this right here looks pretty good. So, right now, he jumps. He jumps right like this. And there are a few glitches right now. As you can see, if I run right here, he keeps going further and further. His head keeps going further and further in that direction. But we're going to fix that later. It's not that hard to fix. Now, we have the running setup. So now we want to add a new event. Well, I'm going to actually copy this and paste it 2 times because the other events are very similar to this. Now, instead of if player's on the floor, we want to check if player's jumping. Now, if player's jumping, we want to set the animation of this player to be equal to jump. And last but not least, instead of players on floor, set if player is falling, set it equal to the animation of fall. And now I click OK. Now, if I jump, he goes into the jump animation. And if I fall, he goes to his fall animation. And now right here, of course, this is not the smoothest platformer character. It doesn't have many frames for his animation. It has singular frames. But you could make this look much better by using a better character that actually has more frames in their animation. But there's just an example right here. Now let's fix the problem, the elephant in the room of it facing like this and also the character not being able to flip. How are we going to fix these problems? Now we need not animation, we need a variable and it's going to be called facing. And this variable is going to be a number variable. You could use a boolean, but I tend to use numbers because numbers are they can do everything that booleans can do and more. So I'm going to set this variable to equal to facing. Make sure it's a scene variable. And we're going to set it as a number. You could use a boolean. I just like using numbers. And by default, it's going to be equal to 0. Now, what we're going to do when we press left, we want it to be equal to 1, and then it flips it horizontally. And then when we press right again, is equal to 0, and then it flips horizontally again. Now, let's go ahead and do that. So let's add a new event. Add a condition, go to other conditions, and go to keyboard. If key press, we want to put if left key is pressed, and add an action. We want to go to other actions, variables, scene variables, change the number variable facing to be equal to 1. Okay, now that that's covered, we want to add a new event, and now we want to check if the scene variable facing is equal to 1. We want to flip the player horizontally. And I don't want to spoil, I'm not going to say what's going to happen, but I'm just going to keep it a secret until it happens. So we're going to click into player and put flip object horizontally, activate flipping, click yes. And you'll be thinking this should work perfectly fine. Now, if I run to the right, of course, everything's fine. I didn't change anything there. But if I click left, as you can see, he really didn't do anything. The character didn't really do anything at all. Why is that? That's because flipping horizontally does not do the same thing to a 3D model as it does to a 3D or to a 2D character. So instead of flipping horizontally, we have to rotate the object manually. Now, so instead of flipping horizontally here, we want to change the Y rotation of it because early in the video you saw that the Y rotation is what actually makes it change its rotation sideways. So I'm gonna click to rotation on y-axis, set it equal to 90. And you're going to see right here that 90 is a good value for it. Now if I click left now, it actually flips. Now we want to do turnaround the same way. We want to turn around the same way. So how do we do that? Now we're going to do copy and paste this code, copy, paste, and instead of putting if left key is pressed, we want to put if right key is pressed. and set this equal to 0. Set this equal to 0. And then instead of if facing 1, let's copy this, paste it. If facing is equal to 0, we want to set the y rotation. As you can see it, we want to set it back to its original y rotation. Its original y rotation is negative 75. So let's set it back to negative 75 if it's equal to 0. And let's click preview now. And let's see where it gets us. I can see it does very good right now. It's doing very good. And that is how you do 3D animations in Gdevelop. You can do a lot with this. You can do racing games with this. Right now, racing games, most of them in Gdevelop that you see, they don't really have animations. But with this knowledge, you can make 3D animated games. And also with this knowledge, you can almost make full-on 3D games that are almost exactly like other 3D games. So with this knowledge, we can use we can do almost anything we want with a few limitations. So please use this as you please. You can of course import other people's animations or you can use your own. Have fun with it, test things out. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment down below. This all helps my channel grow and this supports me, letting me know that you like this content, that you want to see more of it. And also, if you enjoyed this video, just make sure to come back for my next videos. I post almost every week, so make sure you come back almost every week to make sure you don't miss out on any of my new videos. With that said, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.